Tim Walz suffered legal blow in Minnesota eruption, so let's go ahead and watch the video. Enjoy.
A major U.S. city mayor and federal law enforcement are now locked in a direct legal and political collision. What if I told you that Minneapolis, a city already scarred by riots, protests, and national outrage, is once again at the center of a crisis that could redefine federal authority, immigration enforcement, and protest law in America? And what if I told you that a federal judge just issued an order so controversial that even legal experts are asking, what does peaceful protest even mean anymore? Tonight, we're breaking down the DOJ investigation involving Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey, the federal judge's order restricting ICE, the protests that erupted across Minneapolis, and why critics say this moment could change everything, because according to supporters, this is about civil rights. But according to critics, this is a legal nightmare, and it's only just beginning. Minneapolis is no stranger to national attention. Over the past decade, the city has become a symbol, not just of protest, but of America's internal conflict over policing, federal authority, and local governance. From George Floyd in 2020 to sweeping police reforms to repeated clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement, Minneapolis has become a testing ground, a place where policies aren't just debated, they're forced into reality. Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey have long positioned themselves as critics of federal enforcement tactics, particularly immigration enforcement carried out by ICE. Their rhetoric emphasized local control, civil liberties, resistance to what they described as overreach. But critics argue that rhetoric doesn't exist in a vacuum, and when protests turned chaotic, the federal government took notice. The latest unrest didn't begin quietly. Following a controversial federal enforcement operation and the fatal shooting of Renee Good, Minneapolis saw a rapid escalation in demonstrations. At first, they were described as peaceful, marches, chants, signs. But as days passed, streets were blocked, federal buildings were surrounded, law enforcement reported increasing hostility, video clips spread rapidly across social media, some showing calm demonstrations, others showing clashes, property damage, and confrontations. And once again, America found itself asking the same question: where does peaceful protest end and lawlessness begin? That question would soon land inside a federal courtroom. Then came the ruling. A federal judge in Minnesota issued an injunction restricting ICE agents from arresting individuals at protests deemed peaceful, using certain crowd control measures, detaining individuals without clear criminal suspicion. Supporters called it historic. Critics called it dangerous. Legal analysts immediately pointed out the problem. Peaceful protest has no universally accepted definition. What one person sees as protest, another sees as obstruction. What one judge defines as restraint, another calls paralysis. Federal agents were left asking, can we enforce the law, or are we now expected to wait until chaos turns violent? And that uncertainty set the stage for something even bigger. Shortly after the ruling, reports emerged that the U.S. Department of Justice had opened an inquiry into actions and statements made by Governor Tim Walz, Mayor Jacob Frey. The investigation centers around allegations that local leaders may have obstructed federal enforcement, public rhetoric may have encouraged resistance, local decisions could violate federal law. To be clear, no charges have been filed, no guilt has been established. But politically, this was explosive. Walz and Frey responded forcefully, calling the investigation political intimidation, an attack on local governance, an attempt to silence dissent. Meanwhile, federal officials countered, federal law supersedes local policy, rhetoric matters. Enforcement cannot be selectively obstructed. This wasn't just legal, it was ideological. At its core, this conflict isn't just about ICE. It's about who controls enforcement in America. States argue, we know our communities best. Federal agencies respond, federal law applies everywhere. This clash has happened before. Sanctuary cities, border disputes, National Guard deployments, but rarely with this intensity. What makes Minneapolis different is the convergence of judicial rulings, executive rhetoric, active civil unrest,